174 members have recorded their votes in favor of the resolution. Consequently, the resolution for vote of no confidence against Mr. Imran Khan, the Prime Minister of Islamic Republic of Pakistan, has been passed by a majority of the total membership of the National Assembly.
And just like that, Imran Khan's government is no more. Prime Minister of Pakistan, this story has basically gathered international attention at this point. Pakistan, a country of 220 million, but also a country of nukes. So political instability in Pakistan is not necessarily the sexiest thing in the world if you are looking for the continued existence of this planet. I am unaware of any other planet, so I would prefer less political instability, less sexy. Let's get into the story. The story is fascinating. There's all sorts of political intrigue that has taken place in the story, and I just love politics in general. And so I want to get into the events leading up to this and what it could potentially be taking place. Because again, we're not there, right? And most of the political actors that are involved have things and objectives that they themselves want to accomplish. And within the context of that, have certain incentives that are built into what they may or may not do within the context of an ideological framework. Meaning, there may be certain limits that they don't necessarily want to go for ideological reasons. However, under normal circumstances, people go where their emotions go, and oftentimes that's for some kind of political gain. In this very specific case, other people's political gain is Imran Khan's loss. And I want to get into basically the intrigue. And even for that matter, what does it mean going forward for Pakistan? He is no longer going to be prime minister. The weirdest part is apparently there hasn't been any prime minister that has been able to make it through their entire term, with the military basically exerting power either directly or indirectly on the government itself. There hasn't necessarily been one taken down by a no confidence vote, so he's in the record books on that one. But for all intents and purposes, his take is the United States backed a coup, soft coup, but a coup nonetheless, in order to take me out of office because it didn't necessarily like the foreign policy decisions that I was taking, and I was more in the orbit of China and Russia. Is that true? Let's talk about it. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, subscribe. You can always support this content through PayPal, Patreon, or for that matter, Super Chats. Those are also turned on. Let's get into the story. I've been watching this story for a while, and I've been fascinated by it. And we covered it on Fault Lines, 7, 10 a.m. Eastern. Shameless plug. We're on Rumble, rumble.com/faultlines. But we've been talking to some of the people that are on, and we're going to get into the story tomorrow with Morandi. Morandi is astonishingly good, just on issues of Iran and everything else. He was part of the JCPOA negotiations, etc. But he's going to be talking about this tomorrow. But that's it. Let's get into the story. So, Imran Khan, it comes out, a no confidence vote is scheduled to take down Imran Khan. This cat. Come on. Right here, this guy. All right. Imran Khan, in response, says this is a U.S.-backed attempt to take me out of office because it didn't necessarily like that I was an independent actor in regards to foreign policy choices and decisions. That's his point. Now, he turns and the head of the parliament bucks the vote, basically scuttles it. Says, we're not going to have this vote. And then Imran Khan goes to the president and says, hey, I need you to dissolve parliament. And in dissolving parliament, we will have new elections. And the president obliges. In which case, again, you have the votes to take him out of office in a no confidence vote. That gets blocked by parliamentary process. The president disposes or dispenses all of it. In which case, they would have to have these kind of grand elections. The Supreme Court got involved. And the Supreme Court basically said, on Thursday, it said right here, it overturned Prime Minister Imran Khan's move to dissolve Parliament, which means the no confidence vote back in effect. So, again, it's back and forth political maneuvering. Get the votes to get rid of the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has political allies of its own, and his own political allies basically blocked the no confidence vote. That was immediately, the president dissolves Parliament. The Supreme Court comes in and dispenses with the dissolving of Parliament, saying, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. That no confidence vote needs to go forward. The no confidence vote went forward today. And what you just saw were them basically collapsing the Imran Khan's government. Now, the question becomes, okay, what took place? Like, what is going on behind the scenes for all of this kind of political maneuvering and political machinations to take place in regards to Pakistan? Does Imran Khan have a point that it was a foreign influence? That basically the United States was displeased with him? Now, here's the thing. There are so many things that can be true in this. So many things that can be true. And it's hard to know exactly what, and it is probably a combination. But I would say this. Imran Khan with Vladimir Putin during the invasion. So as the United States was flipping out and it was browbeating all of these various countries to fall in line and to condemn Russia, something half of the world basically didn't do. Half of the world is still exchanging. Basically, non-NATO countries are still working with Russia. But besides the point. The U.S. goes into browbeating all of these countries to take actions that are not in their constituent interests. Now, this included India, this included China, etc. As the invasion was taking place, Imran Khan was meeting Vladimir Putin, which gets across where he is and what orbit he's in more than the other orbit. Would the United States see that, be apoplectic over that he's not falling in line, and reach out to various members in Pakistan? Now, understand, the United States has a very close relationship with the Pakistan military. And the military has it's not like military is under the political branch entirely. It's different than here. But in their very specific case, you have a military that is closely aligned with the United States, and you have various political actors there who, depending on what you may grease their hands with, may be open to switching political allegiances. Now, the vote tally was 174, which is basically a simple tiebreak or a simple majority, which meant that 168 still backed the government. So it's not like you needed a ton of people to do it. You had an opposition. The opposition had a coalition of people. You only needed a few to tilt. You only need a few to tilt. So is it beyond the soft power of the United States that has all sorts of political ties and all sorts of military ties to basically tip it in the favor of an opposition that will be far more amenable to the United States' interests? The answer is, of course, yes, that's possible. Of course that's possible, right? I mean, that's not even shocking per se. You would even on some level expect the U.S. to be resentful of the fact that he's sitting there doing that invasion. And if they had the capability of getting rid of him, they would take the capability to get rid of him. So yeah, you can't necessarily dismiss that. That is entirely possible. You also can't really disambiguate what's going on here in Ukraine and this with China. The United States continues to see China as an existential threat to its hegemony from an economic standpoint and at some point from a militaristic standpoint, just because China is going to have to grow militarily almost by definition in order to protect its interests. So China has a relationship with Pakistan, especially with Imran Khan being more in the orbit of China and Russia. To show how close this relationship is, or at the very least the way China puts it, as the coup, as he calls it, takes place, China puts out this. Futile for U.S. to sow discord between Pakistan and China. Global Times. Now, if China is putting this out, they're not putting this out for no reason. They're putting this out for a few things. A, we have a close relationship with Pakistan. First point. The fact that you've overthrown the government or because a new government is coming in is not going to diminish one iota how close we are with Pakistan. Now, that could be bluster on some level. That could be true on some level because of the economic advantages for working with China. But just from your own conception of the world and the way that the United States has positioned itself against Russia, and yeah, also against China, who they say they're closer to allies, and I strongly suspect that the same thing that's taking place with Ukraine is going to be used in Taiwan in order to kind of provoke China into a conflict that would allow this world to separate that much more into those spheres. My point is, if you had somebody who was in power that was less in the orbit of China and Russia, would that person be more amenable to doing financial deals, for taking cash on the side, and, for that matter, being a bulwark against Chinese expansion in Pakistan? And the answer, again, is of course. Yes, of course. So, can't take that off the table. There's that part. The other part to this is the opposition. So, the New York Times, when this first came out, the opposition was giving these kind of glowing interview about the United States. So, while Imran Khan, right here, Khan claimed that this was part of a ploy by the United States to orchestrate a regime change in Pakistan, doubling down on the allegations he's pushed in recent days as his political support has slipped away. Quote, "How can I respect the result when the whole process is discredited?" Mr. Khan said, describing the proceedings completely marred. But when you get down into the military, this is what the military is saying. Speaking at the security conference in Islamabad, the Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa said that Pakistan hoped to expand and deepen its ties with countries including the United States, a sharp rebuke to Khan's foreign policy agenda, distancing Pakistan from the United States. General Bajwa said that Pakistan shares, quote, shares a long history of excellence, adding that the United States represents Pakistan's largest export market. Unlike Khan, who has not condemned the Russian invasion of Ukraine, not just not condemned, he was in Moscow, Bajwa referred to the invasion as unfortunate and said that despite legitimate security concerns of Russia, its aggression against a smaller country cannot be condoned. So again, this guy is also trying to dance between the raindrops on some level in the way that he's trying to explain this and get this across. He doesn't want to alienate any of the people that are involved in it, meaning Russia, China, etc. And so he tries to deal with all of them. I love this stuff. I love the way that these guys try to keep these connections, meaning at some point you're forced to make a choice in what you need to do, and you're trying to make that choice without losing too much in the choice that you're being called to make. In this case, he wants to continue a close relationship with the United States, which he already has. Hence the flowery words. By the same token, hence, despite legitimate security concerns. Now, the West would never. By the same token, it is also possible that instead of this soft coup stuff, that the organizations within the country itself, and the standpoint of the political and the military establishment, could have reached out for help in order to get the extra few votes. Or maybe they didn't want the relationship to the U.S. to spoil, or thought that there will be consequences to Pakistan itself if they did not push him out. Meaning there are a few things that could be going on all at the exact same time. From the standpoint of the Prime Minister of Khan himself, what he wanted to do was to have an election, which makes you have to question, well, why did he want to have an election? The political establishment is clearly closer to the United States, meaning the political and military elite in the Pakistan country are clearly closer to the U.S. Even the words that they were using, even this notion that they wanted to be closer in alignment with the West, that gets across their framing of the world. That's their framing. Just like the elites here in the United States, in that separation where they're somewhat tone deaf to the public itself. Well, same thing. People are people anywhere you go. Pakistan is far more skeptical of working with the United States, which is the reason that Imran Khan could take that position of being more in alignment with Russia and China. I hope you understand what I mean. From his standpoint, as a political actor, him coming out saying, these guys are working with America, is not that much different than saying Donald Trump is working with the Russians. people are people everywhere you go. And the ways in which we interact or smear opposition, relatively similar, just in a different cultural context. In that very specific case, though, he's hitting them on that very specific point of saying the opposition is working with the United States. Let's have an election. He believes that in the fires of an election, his legitimacy would be conferred that much more, which would stabilize his political clout in the country. That's the exact reason why he wanted to do it. Do you think a prime minister would have went for an election if he didn't necessarily think he was going to win it? He thought, from a political standpoint, his chances were pretty much nil. The fix was in. But from the standpoint of whether or not he could remain power or regain power with an election, yeah, he thought he could. He didn't get that opportunity. When the Supreme Court comes in, the Supreme Court basically says, yeah, the confidence vote is going to be held. It was held today. He was out and he was deposed. My point here is that from his standpoint, the public is probably more in alignment with him. That's all I mean by that. Meaning in the sense of their political framing. It's very possible. I would even go so far as to say it's likely. Probably won that election. He comes out immediately and puts out a tweet. This. Pakistan became an independent nation in 1947, but the freedom struggle begins again today against a foreign conspiracy of regime change. It is always the people of the country who defend the sovereignty and democracy. An election will have to take place at some point. And his take is the United States has just pulled off a soft coup. You know, the country that my constituents don't like, yeah, they've pulled off a coup using these opposition leaders, these elite opposition leaders who have basically shown fealty and allegiance to the United States. That's what they've done. And so we need to have a democracy uprising. I mean, so he's gotten to the point of even calling people out into the streets right here. This is his political party, Tehreek Insaf, protests points nationwide. Shortly, the nation will demonstrate how they stand with their leader. And they're basically showing, hey, here are the places where we're going to protest. That is over the entire country. That is over the entire country. What happens from here? What happens from here, right? That is indeed the question. And I don't know if anyone exactly knows an answer to that. I mean, at the end of the day, he's basically calling for people to come onto the streets. I'm not going to call it an uprising, but it's definitely something. And like I said, I think it's unclear what it's going to mean for Pakistan going forward. The new person who's supposed to come into power, they're going to have that vote on Monday morning. So right here. Parliament is basically going to have to make a choice in regards to who is going to form the new government. It's not like the U.S., where we have it's like you elect your parliament and then your parliament basically elects who's the prime minister is going to be. But right here, in the end, 174 lawmakers in a 342-seat parliament voted to depose him, 2 more than the required simple majority. That's what I mean. It didn't take much to do it. Khan's successor is to be elected and sworn in by Parliament on Monday. The leading contender is Shahbaz Sharif, brother of the disgraced Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. Shahbaz Sharif heads the largest party in a diverse alliance of opposition factions that span the spectrum from left to radically religious. Khan's nominees for Prime Minister will be his Foreign Minister, Shah Mohammad Qureshi. Keep your eyes on Pakistan. And like I said, Pakistan and like many of these other countries, what is going to happen as the world starts to kind of separate itself? And as it does so, I suppose you're going to get new financial systems that probably spring up, meaning challenges to the SWIFT system. I mean, you must understand, you can have your currency as a reserve currency up until the point you start to use it as a weapon. The moment you use it as a weapon, other countries are going to look for ways to mitigate it. It's the most natural thing in the world. No country can retain its sovereignty if it can't necessarily control its finances. And if the U.S. on a whim could just get rid of that, oh man, meaning any country that is basically at odds or at the bad end of the United States, they can either be sanctioned or, for that matter, eliminated from the SWIFT system or even have their reserves, meaning the money that was being held in their banks, confiscated. That is a big, big, big deal. That is a massive deal. And so, look, we'll see what happens. China has come out and condemned it. Russia's come out and condemned it. But again, what is the reality on the ground? Does the U.S. have something to do with it? Maybe. I would even go so far as to say likely. Because every incentive in the world goes in that direction. By the same token, every incentive in the world goes for him to say exactly what he's saying right now in order to go after the opposition and kind of prepare and gear up for an election. The question is, if he doesn't have the backing of the political elites and if he doesn't have the backing of the military, what kind of political campaign can he run in that country where he is no longer in power? I hope that makes sense. We'll see. I don't understand, let's say, the internal politics of Pakistan to understand the level of influence that, let's say, the elites in that country, or for that matter, the military in that country, both of which dominant, can sway public opinion. Meaning, like in the United States, if you remember during the election, any person that the media basically was trying to spotlight on will go up in the polling. It was the weirdest thing ever. So they would look at Pete Buttigieg, he had his moment. Elizabeth Warren, she had her moment, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody liked Biden. But the media, for the most part, eventually put their arms around him. The Democratic Party put their arms around him. And the public went right along with it. Meaning, people like Sanders, or for that matter, people like Ron Paul, even though those people had a massive base of support, a legitimate, real base of support, the media was always critical and skeptical in the framing that they'd use to basically talk about those candidates, meaning there was always a headwind. I don't know how influential the headwind may be in Pakistan. That's the point that I'm getting at, which means, okay, they got him out of office. Are they also going to have machinations to keep him out of office from the standpoint of an election? Stay tuned. Like, share, and of course, subscribe. Let's see, we have people here. All right. Wesley Walker. Thank you, Wesley Walker. Appreciate that, man. All right, guys, I'm going to say like, share, subscribe. I'll see you guys in a few.